Now, I don't know if you've ever done this, but I sure have. You set a fitness goal, perhaps it's to lose weight or to go for a walk a certain amount of times per week or maybe to the gym, but it doesn't happen. Then you get the guilt. You might also have some feeling of social expectations around how much you're supposed to be exercising. Perhaps you feel guilted into exercising. Psychology consultant and author Dr. Jo Lukens is with me to discuss avoiding exercise guilt and to get our mind right. Good morning.
Good morning, Susan.
Now, it is that time of year that we are having a few probably extra treats and there might be a bit of exercise guilt going on. What is exercise guilt and how does it present in our lives?
We can see it in a couple of different ways. It's such an interesting topic to talk about, and particularly, as you said, the timing is rather good. So we know that exercise guilt for a lot of people is a feeling of disappointment. Sometimes it can be a sense of shame, which is a slightly different thing, when our fitness goals are unmet. So like you said, it might be about not doing exercise and feeling that there's an expectation that exercise is something we need to include in our lives and we don't. So it's the emotion that comes with that. And then sometimes for the very regular exercises, dropping even one activity can sometimes also bring about exercise guilt. And I think the common thing, and you said it in the introduction, is the word should is often featuring in there. And that's, the word should is often linked to guilt.
Yeah, that should or I have to rather than I get to.
Absolutely.
So why might using guilt as that motivator for exercise be harmful?
Yeah, it's a great question because some people would listen to this and go, that's the only way I get myself out the door. And I understand that. And from time to time, it may get you to where you want to be, but it may not get you feeling the way you want to be feeling. And what it can do if we do it regularly is almost develop something of an almost toxic cycle, if you like, of self-pressure. And what happens is then exercise feels more like a punishment rather than being a positive experience. So most of us would rather not engage in a punishment than a positive experience. So then it actually increases the likelihood that you want to avoid exercise.
Yeah. So what role does that mindset play then in how we approach exercise? Should we be approaching it?
I think one of the challenges is that when we see it as, whether we see it as a chore or a reward is largely what it's going to impact it. And you mentioned before, do I get to do this exercise? Because the one thing I know is whenever I speak to someone who's injured, who's physically not able to exercise because of an injury, whatever that might be, they're often saying, oh, I can't wait until I can get back to doing that, So it's, if you've got a body that's physically capable of exercising, then that's fantastic, and that you get to do that. Looking at it from a gratitude framework, and we know that flexible positive thinking does help us when we're trying to make sustainable habits moving forward.
Can you explain the difference between that sort of guilt and shame in the context of exercise?
Normally guilt we see in relation to a specific thing. So if you'd said you were going to go for a walk this morning and then you didn't, it's linked to a behaviour. Whereas shame tends to be a more global feeling, if we want to say that. It's more about our general self-worth. And so what you find is that shame tends to creep into other areas of our lives as well. So guilt can sometimes motivate us to change our behaviours, but what we see with shame is it really pushes us closer to withdrawing our behaviours and a really negative self-view. So the two are very closely linked, which is why ideally, if we can find a way to be looking forward to exercise, it takes us away from that negative territory.
Hearing from psychology consultant and author Dr. Jo Lukens, what sort of practical tips can help somebody move from guilt to enjoyment in exercise?
Yes, so lots of things. The first one, the obvious one, is pick something that you like. Don't pick your least favourite activity to do, because then you're more likely to look forward to it. And on the days when it doesn't quite go to plan, you don't quite fully do, you're going to walk for 40 minutes and you walk for 10 or whatever it might be. Being a bit kind to yourself, I think, is probably one of those things that kindness often comes back as being one of our answers to many of our questions. And then that helps us shift our focus from that sense of obligation to, I get to do this, this is my way of looking after my body, this is my way of being kind to myself, prioritising myself, all of those great things. So it helps to build our resilience. And then we get the flow-on effects of feeling good from having done some physical activity, and then that then rolls into the rest of our day.
Psychology consultant Dr. Jo Lukens, thank you very much for all of those little tips and tricks. I will be very mind-wise in how I think of those healthy decisions that I'm making and my activity levels, especially over Christmas. Thank you very much for your time this morning.